Groups have been protesting in Washington, D.C. this week after President Donald Trump took control over local police. And this is another example of people using their voice to express opinions, and in this case, concern over the administration's policies. And joining us this morning to discuss the power of audible protests in 2025, Dr. Justin Eckstein, author of Sound Tactics and an associate professor of communication at Pacific Lutheran University as well. The book right here, and it is out now.
It is.
It's been out for a while, but it's very topical, obviously. So what makes protesting so important, do you think, in 2025?
I think that's a really great question. I think right now we're seeing a bunch of different things happening at the same time. You're seeing the emergence of new technology like artificial intelligence. You're seeing cataclysmic climate change, which is impacting different communities, and a widening wealth gap that is making unequal access to basic needs more pronounced. And protest is really how we hold those with power accountable.
How does your book outline the goal and hopeful outcome of a successful protest? And we were just talking about the No Kings protest from a couple of months ago, and a lot of people consider that to be kind of a successful protest across the country.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's really interesting to define how do we know what is a successful or effective protest. And I think there are really two ways that we can think about this. One is obviously if there's some sort of policy outcome, which is the most intuitive response. Right. But I think the second is the way that it might introduce new concepts that give us fresh insight to old problems. So an example would be when Occupy Wall Street was around and it defined the 99% versus the 1%, it gave us a new language to think about wealth inequality.
Obviously, when we see protests, it's a very visual thing, but what makes sound an effective way of communicating through protests as well?
Yeah, so what's interesting about visuality is it's something that's focused, it's something that you look at, whereas sound, you don't have earlids, right? You can't close your ears, and it is ubiquitous, and it's salient, and it grabs attention. In the book, I talk about there are three unique features, right? The first is that it's immediate, the second is that it's immersive, and finally, it is intense. And what I mean by that is immediacy describes the way sound contorts time and gives us a sense of timing. Immersion is the way that it gives us a sense of space and proximity, and intensity is the way that you can feel viscerally sound in the way it exerts pressure.
Who is typically meant to be on the receiving end of these protests? Who are these protests for?
Well, the people participating in the protest often have two audiences, right? The first audience is the person directly being addressed, right? So someone in power that they want things to change. And then also the public, right? Because that's ultimately who exerts the pressure to make change happen.
Getting back to the sound part of this, what are some modern case studies of protests that actually use sound very effectively?
Yeah, so one of the ones I look at in my book was, I don't know if you remember in 2018, the March for Our Lives protest for...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for those who might not immediately remember it, this is what happened when there was a school shooting in Florida, and a bunch of students took the reins on the gun debate. And they held a mass rally in Washington, D.C., and in particular, there's a moment at the very end where Gonzalez, they were known as Emma at the time, came up and stood there quietly for over 4 minutes, right? And to me, this is a really good example of a sound protest because, one, the silence actually exercised quite a bit of power over people. People were talking about that moment. But second, it introduced new concepts to the public lexicon where we started thinking about guns not just in terms of Republicans and Democrats, but as a generational divide and how that enabled different ways to think about it.
In that case, the power was in the lack of sound, right?
Right, exactly.
Tell me about what you hope people take away from this book. Again, it's Sound Tactics, and also where can readers access this?
Yeah, so my main hope is that people have a fresh insight into the way protest happens and what might make a good protest. I have a long discussion about what a demand is and how that's different than like a request. And people can access it actually on Penn State's website. They generously made it open access so that anyone could read it.
We don't usually get that from an author where he's encouraging people to go get his book for free, but that is the case with Penn State, right?
Yeah, we're really grateful that they were able to do that.
All right. Dr. Justin Eckstein, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Good stuff.
Thank you for having me.